You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Callie Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Callie Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
You are listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes of the Addictions Coach and the Addictions Academy. My guest today, I'm very excited for my guest today, is Michael Venn, and he is the creator of The Heroin Effect. But more importantly, he's a director, a writer, a producer, and content creator whose background in music led him into the film world. He made his writing and directorial debut in 2010 with the short film Dark Scribbles, which premiered in the Short Film Corner at the 2010 Festival de Cannes and was an official selection at film festivals across the country. In 2012, Michael went on to produce and co-direct the award-winning feature documentary In Danger of Being Discovered. In 2014, he wrote and directed a series of 4 music videos for the Grammy Ballot-nominated singer-songwriter Lizzie Marella. He was also nominated for a regional Emmy at the 39th Boston New England Emmy Awards for the PSA It's Time, Let's Talk. In 2017, Michael won the New Hampshire Filmmaker of the Year Award at the New Hampshire Film Festival. Michael's current project is the feature documentary film The Heroin Effect, which is now available on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play, and it was inspired by the opioid crisis that is currently plaguing the country. So welcome, Michael, and all your amazing accomplishments.
Thank you so much, Callie. I really appreciate you having me on.
My God, I read your bio. I'm like, won this. I'm like, geez, I haven't even won an award once in my life. That's awesome.
You will.
I don't know. I'm getting
well, thank you. I mean, no, you're not at all. I'm probably older than you.
So tell me how you got here. Tell me why were you inspired to do The Heroin Effect? I know, obviously, you're inspired for film, but what made you do this, and how did you get here?
It was a really interesting, story when I got the idea to do it. I'm a single father. I have been since my son was around 9 months old. He's just turned 14 the other day. And, probably just almost 4 years ago, he and I were, I live in a downtown area, and we walked downtown to grab a cup of coffee with the dog, and kind of went for a walk one morning, and it was in the fall. It was nice out, and we walked back home, and I ran into this friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a few years. And, we were talking, and I knew he had been in a bad car accident. And, I said, hey, it looks like you're doing great. Heard about the accident. Nice to see you're all right. And he goes, yeah, do you know a whole story? And I was like, no. And he goes, I'm a heroin addict. I, shot up, nodded out, totaled my car. I'm lucky to be alive. And I've been in recovery now for 10, 11 months, and living in a sober house. And literally it floored me. That moment right there floored me, because this is a kid who grew up in a good home, had great parents, well-educated, athlete, good-looking guy. He was the guy that literally, if you saw him, you wanted your daughter to date him, or you wanted your son to grow up to be like him. Smart kid. He was in grad school at the time. And I remember thinking, and kind of looking at my son and going, this isn't making any sense to me. Like, how are you a heroin addict? Like, that doesn't fit the stereotype that, kind of Hollywood sold us over the years. So, I talked to him for a while, shook his hand, said, man, keep in touch. I'm glad to hear you're doing really well. And, walked the rest of the way home, and, walked in the door, grabbed a notebook, and wrote 3 pages of an outline, which became the idea for the film. And the whole thing started with me writing. And the very first sentence that I wrote was like, I wanted to do a documentary film on heroin without shooting scenes with like people shooting up or doing heroin or scoring dope on a street corner. And, it was like, I didn't want to be that stereotypical needle porn kind of thing where it was just like, find a junkie, follow them around, watch them score dope, watch them shoot up, watch them die. Like, that story's been told and it's the wrong story. So for me, it was really like I needed to change perception. And as a musician, every band I ever listened to growing up was, influenced by that, whether it was, Miles Davis and John Coltrane, or whether it was the Sex Pistols, or whether it was the Beatles or Sublime or Jane's Addiction or whatever it was. All those bands were affected by heroin. And, it was something that I needed to do something about it right then and there, and I couldn't stop myself from not do it. So I, pretty much said, all right, cool, here's my next idea for a film, and, went out, started filming a couple of weeks later, and spent 3.5 years filming it. And at one point I thought I was done, and some storyline stuff changed, and went back out and kept going. And so now I'm just happy that it's available on iTunes and Google Play and Amazon, and that kind of the rest of the world can see it. And I hope I did a service that was to really help change the shame and the stigma and the way that addiction is looked at in this country, because the opiate crisis is out there, and, we're losing a generation. And over the past year, I lost 3 friends, one of whom happened to be the kid who influenced, gave me the idea to use the film and, to do the film. And then, 2 of the other ones, one of them was an attorney and the other one was a musician friend of mine. So it affects everybody, I think, and especially here where I live.
I've been in this 25 years, been doing this. This is all I do, addiction space. So I watched the film last night, and that's the first thing I noticed was it's not, look how bad this is. It was stories of hope, stories of people that conquered it, which we don't have a whole lot of, which I think was a really nice take on it, because every film we have, every documentary we have, it's like, look how bad this is, but there's no solution. There's no hope.
Right.
And I watched the film and I'm like, wow, this is a really good take on, hey, you can recover. Hey, you can have a full life. These are things you can do, right? I think you had one girl on there opening up a treatment center. It was like, wow, these things that she's doing from, years ago, she was a heroin addict, and now look how far she's come. I think it's just a different take, and I really like that spin on it. Have you gotten any pushback from the addiction community, or have you gotten accolades? What kind of feedback are you getting?
So far, the majority of the feedback that I've gotten has been accolades. It's been really good. I think, portraying it the way I did. I mean, like I said, the best thing to do, especially during this crisis, is focus on a solution, focus on, the positive, try to offer the fact that there is hope and that people do recover and they can go on and do amazing things. Eric Spofford, who's in the film, you hear his story and he was like, you can find an heroin addict as bad as I was. You're not going to find anybody worse. And this is a guy who, overdosed 5 times, came back, and now he owns the largest treatment facility here in New Hampshire called Granite Recovery Centers. And, he's doing amazing things and impactful things. And, when I started doing the research for the film, and his name kept coming up, so I reached out to him and was fortunate enough to film him very early on. And when he started getting into the treatment industry from just a sober living facility that he had done prior to that, one of the other things that I got turned on to was Dr. Bruce Alexander's work via the book Chasing the Scream, which is about dislocation theory, and it was a book by Johann Hari that was on the New York Times bestseller list, and he had done a really famous TED Talk about taking a look at everything that we know about addiction. And it really embraced Bruce Alexander's dislocation theory of addiction and the Rat Park experiment that he had done. And, and it was one of those things where it was like, at this point I was sick of hearing and seeing stories about, just another overdose, and seeing, what was it, the HBO Cape Cod documentary, which I've actually never watched because I was doing a film on heroin and I didn't want to be influenced by it one way or another. It was one of those things where I was like, I wanted to show something that I hadn't seen in movies or television or anything like that, where, I tried to let's get out of this and let's focus on the people and let them tell their stories in their own words. Found a lot of people in recovery. And I mean, sadly, the whole film isn't happy all the time. There's a lot of people in it that are struggling, and there's, some people in it that don't make it. And, it's the reality of it.
If you are an active user and they're watching this film, what is your takeaway for them? what was your goal for somebody who's struggling, who can't seem to get out of the rat race?
My goal was that if you're an active user and you see the film, it gives you hope. At least it gives you, hopefully, an idea that there is hope, that you can recover, that there is a way out. And you can see, because there's somebody else, out there that you see in this film that shows you that is possible. I mean, I used to be a surfer. It seems like another life ago, but Mavericks, a famous surf break in California.
Mm-hmm.
That was a place that people looked at and they were like, oh my God, that's huge. That, nobody will ever surf it. And one guy finally did. And then he surfed it alone for 10 or 13 years before anybody else would ever paddle out and join him. Now it's a huge thing. They made a movie about him and they have surf contests there and all that stuff. But it wasn't until somebody showed, yeah, you know what, this is possible, that anybody else went and did it. So kind of using that surf analogy for this documentary film, if you show somebody who's struggling with their addiction that there is hope, that people do recover and they go on to do amazing things and impact other people's lives and, help other people into recovery, then, I mean, it shows that anything's possible. And when a lot of people that I know that are in recovery, they all work, kind of in that field, trying to help other people find recovery and out of their addiction.
That's awesome. Now, do you have other projects in the works coming out, or what is your next thing?
My next thing, it's kind of been a joke with this because, before when I thought this was done, I was like, okay, great. I'm going to go on. And I was like, I'm just going to do something totally different than what I've ever done. I'll do a horror film just because that'll be fun and whatever. And then all of a sudden some stuff changed with some of the characters, or the people that are in the heroin effect. And I was like, okay, I have to go back out and I have to film their families because, somebody passed away and I wanted to make sure that storyline came, was given a chance to tell the whole story. Or there was a woman who's in the film who, I filmed her and she was great. And then she dropped off the face of the earth. I couldn't find her and I didn't hear anything about her. And, I kind of wondered. And then all of a sudden she popped back up and reached out to me and I was like, okay. And I went and filmed her in the treatment center that she was at. And then I went and filmed her in prison that she was at.
I liked her piece the best, to be honest with you, because it was so real. That's, what I deal with clients is exactly that. Here they are, they're doing the right thing. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and bam, there's an old warrant and they're in jail. And they're like, I'm doing the right thing. How did I get here? And it's not necessarily that you just decided to do the right thing, that everything is going to just all of a sudden be, butterflies and cupcakes. You still have to clean up the other side of your street. And she talks about that. So I really actually enjoyed listening to her. And of course, John Harry, you had him on there. He's so controversial. He's one of my favorites.
He's a great guy. I mean, I loved his book. I was fortunate enough. We had all these different opportunities. We were going to go film him in Boston and then, he was really sick. So we couldn't film him there. He was like, listen guys, don't show up. I'm actually stuck in a hotel really sick. And then all of a sudden he was in New York and I'm like, great, man. I used to play in New York. It's a 4-hour drive. Let's go. And so hopped in the car, drove to New York City, had to rent a conference room in the hotel that he was staying in, filmed him in there. And then I turned it around and drove home. But, we spent 4 hours filming him in this conference room, got some great stuff. He's extremely, empathetic and he's just a really knowledgeable guy. And, he really embraces Dr. Bruce Alexander's, dislocation theory and the rat park, experiment and everything like that. So it was a wonderful way to kind of highlight that stuff and really have an expert who, he wrote this great book and who is really knowledgeable about addiction and addiction treatment and how we look at it as a society. And, so I was really fortunate to have Johan, in the film. And, there was a couple other people that I really wanted to get in the film and couldn't, or ended up cutting out because the story seemed more impactful without having celebrities in it.
Right. Well, that's the other thing that I noticed. It wasn't Russell Brand talking about this and Demi Lovato talking about that. It was real people. And when you watch some of these shows and some of these, documentaries, it's like the Chris Herron Project, which is awesome, but it's a famous person and it's hard to relate. If you're middle class or lower class, you're going, okay, well, that's great. So he has tons of money, he has tons of drugs, and he cleaned up. Yay, he has stuff I don't have. He has resources I don't have. But here you're filming the average person who has the same resources the rest of the world has. And they have these amazing stories to tell. So I think the film is very powerful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's funny that you mentioned Russell Brand and Chris Herron, because at one point I did have clips of Russell Brand in the film talking with Johan because they're friends, or Russell Brand with Oprah Winfrey. And at one point, a friend of mine, an LA filmmaker friend of mine, was just like, listen, dude, you need to take that out of the film because it takes you out of the story. You're telling these people's stories, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, look, it's Oprah. Oh my God, it's Russell. And it takes you out of it, where, you really need to be engrossed in these characters and these lives that you're just being introduced to. And I totally agreed with it. And I was like, thank you for the honest feedback. And then, Chris Herron is an amazing story. He used to play for the Boston Celtics, and there's a great documentary about him called Unguarded that ESPN 30 for 30 did. And in his story, I know for a fact, in the film, Sandy, who's in the film, the one who opened up the treatment center that's kind of highlighted throughout the film, she went to a high school gymnasium where he gave the whole talk about his story, and she burst out into tears. And that was the moment where she was like, I don't want to be anonymous about my recovery anymore. Like, I want to tell the world, and I want to get involved in this. And so, I was in the process of reaching out to him, and again, didn't want to have him in the film because this was about these people that weren't famous. And I think that helps, anybody who's suffering with addiction or struggling and they need to find recovery. I think it is, like you said, really helpful when you're like everyday people, not celebrities.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes the film stand out, because there's all these other films. It always has one endorsement celebrity. It's like, oh yeah, I endorse this film, or I'm in this film, or it's my story. But the reality is we don't have, a lot of common stories that are told in such a great way that it's hope, 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 hope. This is what you can accomplish. This is what you can do. I mean, the gentleman in his front yard talking about how many times he shot up and now he's got a treatment center, and it's like, wow, and he's got kids running around. He's like, these are my kids. This is my house. These are things I've built. So somebody in active addiction going, I'm never going to get there, it makes them feel like it's possible. So I think that's awesome. Now, how can our listeners find the film? How can they download it? How can they access it?
The easiest way right now is we have distribution online via iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon. So you can get it, in all three of those locations online. And, and if you forget those or whatever, you can check out theheroineffect.com. It's got links to all the places where you can download it and watch the film. And hopefully, we'll get it picked up, on a wider scale. And who knows? I mean, I've been talking to somebody about doing some theatrical things, in Austin, Chicago, San Francisco, LA. So just getting it out there and partnering with some various organizations out there. I mean, that won't be until next year, but just, for me as a filmmaker, it's really just getting people to watch your film and hopefully having a positive impact and helping to change perception. And, in a lot of ways, I made the film for people that, aren't struggling with addiction, but don't understand it. And so, there's those people that always comment that, oh, it's just another overdose and, let them die. And that's their choice. As a filmmaker, you want to kind of touch those people too and have them go, well, wait a minute, man, maybe this isn't the choice that you think it is. You kind of have no choice when you're an addict. And for this whole thing to change and for us to look at it differently and as a society make, strides in the right direction where we can really impact, recovery and kind of ending this current opiate epidemic. I think it's going to take those people's minds being changed that are kind of those naysayers and have them look at this a little bit differently, because when they see that it's their neighbor, their kindergarten teacher, their friend, their family member, their loved one, I think all of a sudden then it puts it into a new perspective, and then we're kind of able as a society to make changes that we need to make.
Right. That's awesome. So we're going to put all those links up that I have that you sent me for everybody so that they can reach the film, they can reach you and see everything and see what you're working on. And I think that's amazing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you getting in touch with me and allowing me to do this with you, because I think, again, it's just it's going to help get it out there, and I really appreciate that. And I actually have one question for you, but what did you think of the Daniel in the film who kind of kept his heroin diary on his cell phone and spoke directly to...
Yeah, that, I don't want to say triggered me, but that reminded me of my husband, because I wrote a book called I Married a Junkie. My husband was fairly clean when we met, but it wasn't for heroin. It was coke. And he got hooked on heroin. And I was watching that and I'm like, oh my God, this reminds me of my husband's addiction. So it was triggering for me in that sense that it was like, wow. But at the same time, it was like sobering in a sense of like, we don't want to go back to that direction. So it's kind of neat. It was neat the way you had that through out there. And at the same time, the sides of hope of this is what you can achieve versus what you are.
Thank you. It was one of those things that, there was a lot more footage of him that's not in the film, but I was very fortunate to have access to that footage to incorporate into it and allow him to tell his story as somebody who was in the midst of his addiction and he was struggling. And you got to see, I mean, he was a bank manager. So, you got to see his story and how he was affected with his addiction and see him in his daily life.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful. It's that, having him in that film for families, I think is powerful because families that when they're in their own world and they have a family member in addiction, they're so close to the situation, they don't notice things. But when you look at somebody else's addiction, you're like, wow, this is what's happening. This is really what's happening. And this is the direction we're going to go. So I think it's like a sobering effect for other people to see outside of themselves what's actually happening.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I'm very fortunate to have that footage in the film.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on and join us and talk about the film. And like I said, we're going to have everything up so everybody can reach you. And if you wouldn't mind giving us your social media handles, if anybody has any questions or wants to reach you directly, how can they find you?
Let's see. My Twitter handle, I think, is just my name, although I never look at that. So I should allow you to put that up for me because I'm pretty sure it's at Michael Venn, but it might be my middle initial too. So it might be at Michael S. Venn. Boy, that's one of those things that you never pay attention to. But, through the Heroin Effect, you can find, links to everything for me. And, boy, I should have been more prepared.
It's okay. It's at Michael S. Venn. You're fine. We'll put it all up for them. So,
awesome.
They can just click on it and go right and see it.
Yeah. And the film is, the Heroin Effect, and it's on, Twitter and Facebook and, but theheroineffect.com.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love the work that you're doing. And I do need to read your book that you wrote about your husband because, as a guy who played in bands for a long time and was a musician and a drummer, and you definitely see that running rampant in that industry. Yeah.
Stay on afterwards, and I will get your address and I'll send you a copy.
Ooh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You are listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes and my guest, Michael Venn, which Twitter is Michael S. Venn. So if you have any questions, the movie is called The Heroin Effect if you want to reach out and check it out. Thanks for coming on, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you, guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. I made walked down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying. Now I'm so far from solid ground, but they